All right, so for the past 3 years, the cheapest and only display that Apple's made has been the $5,000 Pro Display XDR, which would cost an extra $1,000 on top just for the matte finish and another $1,000 just for the stand. So when this new Studio Display got announced, it's a very Apple design. It's a 27-inch 5K screen surrounded by all these little Apple bells and whistles. And with the stand included for $1,600, a lot of Apple fans were understandably very happy. But then after the dust of the announcement settled, a lot of us found ourselves asking, wait a second, is this actually a good deal? So now I've been using this display for about 2 weeks now, and I have an answer for you, but I need you to understand how I'm getting there. So for most people who are not interested and were never gonna buy this screen anyway, the is it worth it conversation basically comes down to the spec sheet and just comparing it with other similar displays. It's like when you go to buy a house and the appraisal just goes and looks at square footage and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and materials used and proximity, and comes up with a price based on what other houses with the same sort of specs are going for. So this new Studio Display, it's 27 inches diagonally, 5K resolution, 600 nits brightness. It's a IPS LCD at 60 hertz with P3 color. It's got a webcam up top. It's got some speakers at the bottom, some USB-C ports around the back, and it's $1,600. So if I was an appraiser looking for a comparable house, I would be looking at the LG Ultrafine 5K. That is also a 27-inch 5K IPS LCD. It's at 500 nits, also at 60 hertz with P3 color, a webcam, some speakers, and some USB-C ports on the back. That's $1,300, but it's also 5 years old. And while there are not that many other 5K displays out there, there are a ton of 4K screens. And one of those would be the Dell UltraSharp U2720Q. That is also a 27-inch IPS LCD panel with thinner bezels, also at 60 hertz, and also with P3 color and some ports around the back. Super well reviewed, $589. So if you just go by the specs of the panel, it's actually pretty clear that this display and the tech you're getting for the price is a bad deal. But the second you're actually considering buying a display, you realize it's not just the display specs of the panel that make or break the experience, it's all the stuff that surrounds the screen for someone actually considering using it. And Apple products, they just have a habit of doing this thing where they don't have the best specs on paper, but they offer a unique combination of things that make it really hard to do any sort of one-to-one comparison because nobody else has that exact unique combination of things. Like, how they make up the most cherry-picked stats in NBA media? Like, oh, this guy just became the third player ever to get a triple-double before his 26th birthday after eating Apple Jacks for breakfast that morning. Or like, wow, there's only 5 players to play 800 games and join the 13.5, 5.9, 1.4, 49, 30 club? Anyway, that's how it feels talking about this monitor. So first of all, it's 5K, not 4K. And like I said, there's tons of 4K monitors out there, but this one is 5K for a reason. It's basically the same panel from the 27-inch iMac, which many people, including myself, really liked, even though it's quite old. So it's sitting at a solid 218 pixels per inch, and it also benefits from being exactly twice the vertical and horizontal resolution of 2560 by 1440. So scaling is super clean and everything looks sharper as a result. And then as far as single backlight LCDs go, it's pretty solid. It's got bumped up to 600 nits, which is plenty fine indoors as long as you're not near any windows. I have not had any issues worse than normal with ghosting or light bleed as you see with some LCDs. But obviously it's nowhere near something like a mini LED display with separate backlight zones that can do really good HDR. And then this one I've been testing is the Nano Texture version, which is a $300 upgrade. It's extremely good at killing reflections, and it's impressive that it's this good for $300 when the same treatment on the Pro Display was $1,000. But honestly, I still probably wouldn't recommend it unless you literally work with a window like right behind you or something, because the version without Nano Texture is always going to be slightly sharper and punchier and much easier to clean. But speaking of upgrades, this monitor, which has the stand permanently attached, so it's included, which is nice, but it has height adjustment, which is cool, right? It's nice, but the base version doesn't have that. And so this, just the ability to adjust height is a $400 upgrade to this stand. So the version without height adjustment is a little bit low, and I think a lot of people have started to notice that. And the IMAX didn't have height adjustment, but just for a monitor this expensive to have to spend $400 extra to be able to do this seems kind of ridiculous, even though you can go to an Apple store if you do get buyer's remorse and have them add it after the fact. But hey, if you do, it's a really solid stand. All metal, perfectly balanced and spring-loaded to hold the panel firmly in place. It's actually more sturdy in my experience than the Pro Display XDRs, mostly because it doesn't have to rotate. And just the overall build quality of this monitor is top of the line. It is built so well. And of course, this will never show up on the spec sheet, and this isn't even something traditionally that matters all that much with a monitor, something you don't touch. A phone you want to be built well, things you hold and carry, but this is just gonna sit on your desk. But they went over the top with the build quality, the overall design aesthetic. So in a world of basically all plastic monitors, this one's full metal jacket, sharp corners, the precision drilled perforations at the top for ventilation, all of it kind of is in a class of its own, and I love it. They left enough room inside for a power supply to be built in, so there's no power brick or wall wart. This is probably the best looking and best built monitor out right now. Now, of course, yes, you'd have to really care about something like that to spend extra on it if it's just gonna sit on your desk, but there also is a catch, and it's a really weird decision, but the power cable is not removable. I mean, when you look back here, it's a black plastic circle that looks like it should be removable, and it turns out if you pull really hard, you can actually rip it out the back, but it's pretty clear it's not designed to be removed by the user. This is from the same company that designed a new MagSafe connector for the new iMac. This is a super baffling choice. Turns out there's a special tool required to remove the studio display properly. I don't count that as user removable. We've all seen what a normal removable monitor cable looks like. But now instead it's kind of in this HomePod situation where it's clearly not meant to be user removed. And so now if the cable does get damaged at all, if you run a wheel over it or pet chews on it or something, you have to send the whole thing back to get repaired. Thumbs down. Now above this panel is a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera with center stage and triple microphones, all powered by a literal A13 Bionic chip. For those who remember correctly, that's the same chip that powered the entire iPhone 11. Now, while this is basically the same webcam hardware as the new iPad Air, it looks substantially worse. It's just flat and grainy all the time in any lighting I throw at it. Maybe I just got my hopes up too high. I mean, I knew it would be softer because it's cropping into a 12 megapixel ultra wide frame, so there's less pixels. I knew it wouldn't have shallow depth of field or anything. It's not a big sensor, but I mean, the mics sound pretty good, as you can hear, but there's just no shadows. It refuses to let anything dark actually look dark, which for me is not great. Apple is actually promising a software update that may help things. Imagine that, a software update for a monitor. Apparently it has 64 gigs of onboard storage for some reason. But yeah, bottom line is it's convenient that there's a webcam built in, but there's definitely still a market for an Opal C1 type webcam, the stuff that looks way better than this. But then there are the speakers. So they're all situated in the bottom of the monitor here. There are 6 total, 4 force canceling woofers and 2 tweeters. They say it's the best computer speakers they've ever shipped in any of their systems, and it's true. It's 100% true. This thing, I've compared it to the 16-inch MacBook Pro. These are substantially louder. They fill a room if you wanted to. They can create a somewhat convincing Dolby Atmos surround setup if you want. It's really good. So for built-ins, they are above and beyond the rest. They don't sound as good as dedicated speakers, but if you really want good built-in speakers, then yeah, if you're into that, these do it. By the way, Apple should just make speakers, right? I mean, the HomePod doesn't count. They should, right? They should just make speakers. So anyway, if you want a monitor for the panel quality and the panel quality alone, then there are lots of others just like this for way less money. But if you're one of the surprisingly large group of people who are waiting for a monitor that would work really well in this Apple ecosystem world of products, then this is just what you've been waiting for. It's pretty much made to be used with the new Mac Studio, hence the name. I also plugged into the MacBook Pro, which charges the laptop at 96 watts, But hilariously, I really just didn't think it was that great of a pair. I mean, it looks great next to it, but the MacBook Pro has a much brighter, higher refresh rate mini LED display that just looks way better to me and was preferable for me to use. So I just ended up wanting to use the ProMotion of the laptop screen all the time. But then, just for fun, you can plug it into an iPad and it works perfectly normally, mirrors and charges the iPad. And we also plugged it into a PC, and it worked like a normal monitor at full 5K resolution, and it does actually use the speakers and the webcam, but without any of the processing or center stage that comes from lighting up that A13. What an odd combination of parts, for real. Honestly, for nearly $2,000, if you just close your eyes and say, okay, it's 2022, and Apple is going to make a studio display, you'd expect mini LED, maybe? Or maybe ProMotion? Or maybe it might have Face ID, or a good webcam, or just any combination of those things. Instead, it has none, and a non-removable power cable, and a non-user upgradable stand. It's odd. That is a rare swing and a miss for me, someone who works in a studio. But the real question is the studio display a good deal or not? Well, is the Rolls-Royce Ghost a good deal because it's the only four-door sedan with suicide doors and a 6.7-liter V12 for under $400,000? Does that make it a good deal? Or how about, are the Nike HyperAdapts a good deal because they are the cheapest, best self-lacing shoes you can get right now for $350? Does that make them a good deal? I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe it doesn't really matter if it's a good deal or not if it's exactly what you want. Like if there are other cheaper options, it doesn't really matter because there's only one that does the exact thing that you want it to. And so that's what this is for some people. You're probably just going to want to get this one. But yeah, no, it's not a good deal.